It's probably just the eruption of a volcano that most of you know about and people who were cut into stones. But these are just the tip of the iceberg. When he tells about what happened in the city, how people became like this, how a mother and daughter suddenly stayed like this while playing games, and how they were found, I'm sure you'll be frozen out. If you want to hear for what reason they were punished so severely, we will decamp with you to the ruins of the city of Pompeii in a moment. We will testify to the former state of the city, and we will experience the catastrophe within the last days of Pompeii, October 23, 79 BC. The day before the disaster, the ancient city of Italy, a symbol of the degeneration of the Roman Empire, with Pompeii, a place where the richest people in the world live, a place of abundance and abundance, where there are magnificent buildings, masterpieces, the most beautiful women of the region, and gladiators fighting in the arena of the city. If you look at the map of the city from above, you can see the city like a big fish. It's obvious that it was deliberately designed. Besides, the Pomp is also a port city. On the right, what looks like a fish's eye is an amphitheater. This amphitheater is a place where gladiators entertain the people of the city, and the rich gladiators would enter from here, fight to the death between the gazes of thousands of people. Wealthy people would decapitate defeated warriors to lions. He entertained the savings on them entirely to himself. Not only humans, but animal massacres were also carried out. Gladiators sometimes even fight wild animals just for a little fun, because they were looking for new things to add excitement after a certain time. Who knows what more stories there are in this arena? Put aside the arena and move on to their life in the city. This street you saw was a place where shopkeepers, merchants, and people from many walks passed by horse-drawn carts, and over time this caused the formation of hollows. This place, where thousands of people passed, of course, was polluted with horse droppings, food, beverage garbage, and other waste. Or it was filling up with rainwater. For these reasons, some of them did not even want to set foot here, so stepping stones were made to protect themselves from such factors, so they could cross or ride in a horse-drawn carriage without stepping on dirt, mud, or water. You won't see jumping stones like this in most Antec cities. This actually showed in a way how much they didn't care about cleanliness in the city. You will see these hollow stones at some points in the city. In these spaces, food is placed in containers and served. In the empty part at the bottom, burning wood is a countertop made to keep food warm all the time. On some streets in the city, these restaurants are preserved in the same way today. The food ingredients in the cubes standing at the back. We see frescoes on many walls in many places in the almost 2,000-year-old city. I mean, the murals. I think for them, sexuality and nudity was a behavior and attitude that they were very comfortable with. Some rich people even decorated some bedrooms in their houses with such immoral pictures, perhaps even some of them in pictures they had drawn themselves. The place you see with this protruding wall is the city's brothel. Despite the destruction of many parts of the city, this place stood tall for those who came later to see. Because there is an exemplary situation here, it's just a small place that shows the sinfulness of the people of the city. What makes this place different is that men were not only with women, they were also interested in their own gender. This immorality had spread to the whole city. Even the thoughts of the people of the city were filled with evil. Let me show you an example that explains this. This is a curse tablet that you see. They were writing on this lead tablet what they wanted to happen to people they were angry at, who they didn't want well. They were hiding it in their houses or in their graves. Just like the Black Elder. Here's what it says on this tablet: inflammation. The slave of Postinos. I dedicate your face, your name, your breath and all your vital organs to the infernal gods. Let the man hate him, and he hates the man quickly. It won't do any good. A truly hateful inscription. Historical records report the state of the city before its destruction as a complete perversion, rudeness, and immorality that had reached the last point. Abundance and abundance had spoiled him too much. They didn't have any God beliefs anyway. It was a society that worshipped the clouds. They believed in many made-up gods. None of them were aware of the disaster that awaited them. There was a huge volcano right near the city. It would burn. Look at the size of this volcano. So this mountain was going to be the beginning of the end for them. And eventually the time given to them to fix themselves has expired. October 24, 79. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Hours before the disaster, everyone woke up to a new day. But this was the last day they woke up. The volcano began to move. There were short-term but severe earthquakes. It can be understood that there were some earthquakes before the explosion, as a result of the investigations. For example, millstones were used to make a mixture in a bakery located in the city. Lime mortar residues were found in the samples taken from it. These were usually used to close cracks in the wall inside the same furnace. These depressions and traces of repair were also found. There have been so many earthquakes, large and small, in the last year or two that people are now doing this. He seemed very ordinary. Because the earthquake was happening and it was over. But that day was going to be different from other days. About 5 hours later, around 1 o'clock, Mount Vesuvius exploded with all its violence, with a violence much stronger than an atomic bomb. The city of the pump was soon left under a cloud of petrified lava fragments, ash, gas and dust. Most of the people lost their lives by being breathless due to the effect of the phenomenon called block tire discharge after the explosion. Many of them lost their lives by being crushed as a result of the collapse of the city or burned as a result of volcanic eruptions. 15 hours after the explosion, the city was completely destroyed. There was no trace of the former glory of the city. The palaces of the rich, their slaves, people having fun, children running around the streets, people planning what to do tomorrow, all disappeared in just 15 minutes. A visual of the discovery of the city centuries after the disaster. The clearest image of the clay layer covering the entire city is that those architectural structures, made with perfect delicacy, are buried under the ground. During the excavations, it was almost reached meters below the surface, and the city was thus uncovered. A three-dimensional study of how the city used to look like. But why did it look like there had been no disasters when these people were dying? How did they freeze up like that all of a sudden? Were they found like this during the excavations? During the explosion, thousands of large and small stones were thrown into the environment. The roofs of almost all the houses collapsed along with these stones and the resulting earthquake. When we look at the final state of the city, we understand this better, so that people who have already lost their lives, regardless of whether they are inside or outside, were covered with volcanic ashes in the form of slime, which, according to estimates, rained down in 10 minutes. And they stayed just like that for centuries, for exactly 1,700 years. In 1748, the city was discovered by chance. Thanks to the increasing population and expanding cities, it has come this far. The area had a soft floor, and the excavation started. And while the excavation was being carried out, it was found that there are ancient structures under the ground. Archaeologists were immediately called to the site. In the beginning, they were only aware of the existence of the city. Then, during an excavation, the human skeleton was reached. The ashes in the form of falling slime covered the people who died quickly. And thanks to this, the body shapes left underground, facial features, all of them were preserved. Then, in order to illuminate the history, the parts where the bodies were wanted to be protected, there were gaps in the parts where there were people. Because the organs and skin in the body disappeared over time, those parts under the surface were empty. As in this image, it was dug with a drilling machine from 3 or 4 different places. If there was a certain amount of space, it turned out to be human. Then silicone plaster was poured through these holes and left to dry. After drying, the body was removed from its petrified state, which is the last state we know. So in fact, these people you see did not turn into stone about 2,000 years ago.
They were trapped in the ash layer and have been preserved to this day. So why did some people treat the disaster as if it had never happened? A huge volcano had exploded with an energy much more violent than an atomic bomb. Normally, people are expected to suddenly move in fear or run left and right, looking for a way out of a disaster. But people in this city don't seem to have done that much. For example, look at the family in this picture. A moment when his mother is holding hands and playing games with her child, perhaps on his father's lap. After the disaster, the child's hands were destroyed by time, and the person standing in the corner with his hands in the air was perhaps holding another child again. Some of them were sleeping. They didn't even get a chance to wake up from their sleep and look at what happened. Despite that big explosion and the sound that came out, it was impossible. How could such a thing have happened? There can only be one explanation for this, or it's just that time was suddenly stopped for them. Or, as described in the disaster movie, it didn't last long enough for people to run left and right. It happened in a matter of seconds at a time. To me, this is the most amazing part of all that happened. This aspect of the event is similar to the disappearance of Camel of Pompei and the events of destruction described in the Quran, because when the tribes that perished in the Quran are described, the emphasis is on sudden destruction. There is a verse in the Quran about this as follows. Only one scream was enough for them. They were extinguished instantly. It is obvious that the disaster happened at the moment, that is, suddenly within seconds. A body that was uncovered during excavations a few years ago is really creepy. This picture, which shows that a piece of rock by its weight fell on the head of someone who was walking at the time, perhaps just about to run away, sums up most of it. That not a single person in this sinful city is wanted to live. Here's what we need to understand. These events are not just stories, or a video topic that you can watch and watch. There is an important part here. These people, who were protected by a layer of clay and kept waiting for centuries to appear before us in this way in the future, were sent to Earth to take a lesson from their people. Of course, you should be able to see this big picture. They are not one of the sculptures that you can see and pass by in an art gallery. They are the living dead who carry the traces of the disaster to the present day. You can subscribe to my channel and like the video for such videos to come.